Yeah? Good, all right. So, Tiras, feedback on your essay. Your structure was really clear. You had a clear introduction of your methodology, the methodology of your comparison right at the beginning, which was really nice. So you laid out the foundation of what you were going to do, how you were going to make this comparison between these two schemes of work, and what you were going to talk about, and how you were going to approach the differences between them. That was really, really clear, and it told me straight away what you were going to do. Your comment on assessment strategies, you talk about diagnostic tests, you justify why they're there, you compare aspects of health and safety assessments, which is really interesting to consider as well, given the two very different natures of the schemes of work that you're looking at. And you also identify that they are assessing different levels of ability, and that they assess those different levels of ability in different ways, which is relative to the subject matter that they're attempting to cover. And so, for example, you look at how the vocational subject explores people's creativity more, and the biology scheme of work is more about the application and analysis of subject knowledge. So you identify that they're constructed for very different purposes, which is good. Your use of English was clear, concise, detailed when it needed to be, suitably academic, nothing to worry about there. Use of theory was used appropriately. You commented on domains of learning, good use of Bloom's taxonomy to identify how the schemes of work progress students across the course, and good use of whole as well, and how you comment on the way the schemes of work assess the needs of students. And I really liked, in terms of your critical analysis, I liked your justification for course differences. So you tell us why they're different, not just how they're different, and why they have to be different as well. So you go into the detail of that, of the different nature of the two kinds of schemes of work that you're dealing with. In terms of originality, it would have been interesting to see, and I know this is difficult in the word count that you've got with you, it would have been interesting to see you offer your own suggestions, because you identified some problems that the schemes of work had, which was really interesting, but it would have been also interesting if you'd been able to consider, what would you alternatively do, or what might you alternatively suggest for, if there's this problem with identifying this particular need, or if a scheme of work doesn't seem to include a particular aspect of learning, how might you change that yourself? That was in terms of and your scheme of work itself. Clarity, timing was very, very clear. It laid out exactly what people needed to do at the right time, and it timed. It timed exactly what people needed to do at the right moment, and I can imagine that someone would have been able to pick up that scheme of work and just use it without needing too much explanation as to what they had to do. The teacher activities were lined out very carefully. You told teachers exactly what they had to do, how they had to direct the class and the students. You also wrote what the students were expected to do, so teachers could then inform students of the activities that they were involved in and how they had to progress through that. Design was very good, detailed objectives, they were accessible and achievable. The extension tasks were a nice touch, so it allows for a level of differentiation in your classes, which is really nice to do. And your lessons built on the content of the previous lessons as well, so that was really, really nice to see. So there was this continual relevance of what you were giving them in the previous lesson, because they were going to apply it next lesson to build further on their knowledge. And it helps to push them up Bloom's taxonomy as well, which is always good. In terms of the content, good use of a range of activities, use of question and answering. The only suggestion I would give on that is perhaps some example questions. What might you expect to ask? Again, thinking that this is a document that it's not just going to necessarily be used by you. You want, or even just helpful for yourself, really, that you've got some indication of the kinds of questions you want, and maybe even the kinds of responses that you're expecting from students. But that was all in terms of the criticism of the scheme of work. It was very good otherwise. The rationale, your reflective process, you identify the needs of your students really well. You understand their assessment criteria. And you put a strong emphasis on improving their creative skills, which is obviously important for your subject. Again, the only thing that would have been interesting, you comment on the students needing to meet these assessment criteria, but it would be interesting as well to incorporate in your scheme of work at what point you make them aware of the assessment criteria, because they also need to be aware of what it is they're being assessed on throughout. And it can be helpful, even if you do it once, it can be helpful, I find, often to do it periodically, just so students know constantly what it is they're being assessed on, because they have a habit of forgetting. Good comments on the flexibility of your scheme of work, which is really handy, because a scheme of work needs to be able to adapt to stuff that's going on around it, and you give the students time in that to explore their creativity. And that's it. Yeah, same button.